So, what is DNA and what does it do? The Seven Daughters of Eve by Brian Sykes. The astonishing story that reveals how each of us can trace our genetic ancestors. All of us are aware, as people must have been for millennia, that children often resemble their parents, and that the birth of a child follows 9 months after sexual intercourse. The mechanism for inheritance remained a mystery until very recently, but that didn't stop people from coming up with all sorts of theories. There are plenty of references in classical Greek literature to family resemblances, and muses on the reasons for them was a familiar pastime for early philosophers. Aristotle, writing around 335 BC, speculated that the father provided the pattern for the unborn child and the mother's contribution was limited to sustaining it within the womb as well as after birth. This idea made perfect sense to the patriarchal attitudes of Western civilization at the time. It was only reasonable that the father, the provider of wealth and status, was also the architect of all his children's features and nature. This was not to underestimate the necessity of choosing a suitable wife. After all, seeds planted in a good soil always do better than those put into a poor one. However, there was a problem, and it was one that was to haunt women for a long time to come. If children are born with their father's design, how was it that men had daughters? Aristotle was challenged on this point during his lifetime, and his answer was that all babies would be the same as their fathers in every respect, including being male, unless they were interfered with in the womb. This interference could be relatively minor, leading to such trivial variations as a child having red hair instead of black like his father, or it could be more substantial, leading to major ones such as being deformed or female. This attitude has had serious consequences for many women throughout history who have found themselves discarded and replaced because they failed to produce sons. This ancient theory developed into the notion of the homunculus, a tiny, preformed being that was inoculated into the woman during sexual intercourse. Even as late as the beginning of the 18th century, the pioneer of microscopy, Anthony van Leeuwenhoek, imagined he could see tiny homunculi curled up in the heads of sperm. Hippocrates, whose name is commemorated in the oath that newly qualified doctors used to take, some still do, had a less extreme view than Aristotle, which did give women a role. He believed that both men and women produced a seminal fluid, and that the characteristics of the baby was decided by which part of the fluid prevailed when they mixed after copulation. With the development of dyes and the microscope, now the process of fertilization, the fusion of a single, large eggshell, and a single small, determined sperm, could be observed. When cells divided, strange thread-like structures could be seen assembling and then separated equally into the two new cells. Because they stain very brightly with the new dyes, these curious structures became known as chromosomes, from Greek meaning literally, colored bodies, years before anyone had a clue about what they did. During fertilization, one set of these strange threads seemed to come from the father's sperm and another set from the mother's egg. This was just what had been predicted by a man universally acknowledged as the father of genetics, Gregory Mendel, a monk, born in the Czech Republic, with the important exception of mitochondrial DNA, of which we shall have much more to say later, and the chromosomes that determine sex. Gene-specific pieces of genetic coding that occur in the chromosomes are inherited equally from both sets of parents. The essential part played by chromosomes in heredity and the fact that they must contain within them the secrets of inheritance was already well established by 1903. But it took another 50 years to discover what chromosomes are made of and how they worked as the physical messengers of heredity. In 1953, two young scientists working in Cambridge, James D. Watson and Francis Crick, solved the molecular structure of a substance which has been known about for a long time and largely thought of as dull and unimportant. As if to emphasize its obscurity, it was given a really long name, deoxyribonucleic acid, now happily abbreviated to DNA. Although a few experiments have implicated DNA in the mechanism of inheritance, the smart money was on proteins as the hereditary material. They were complicated, sophisticated, had 20 different components, the amino acids, and could assume millions of different forms. Surely, the thinking went, only something really complicated could manage such a monumental task as programming a single fertilized egg cell to grow into a fully formed and functional human being. It couldn't possibly be this DNA, which has only 4 components.